Hi guys, it's Jess and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if it is your first time here. Today I'm going to be doing a book haul and an unboxing, and these are all the books that I have accumulated since my last haul, which was in the middle of December. So it includes books that I got for Christmas and books that I've just treated myself to because I felt like it, and some books that I had on pre-order for 2018 as well. And as usual, as you'll know if you've watched any of my book hauls before, there are quite a number of books to get through, so let's just jump straight in. These books are in no particular order, and the first one I'm going to talk about is The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. This is a book which I have seen doing the rounds a fair bit on BookTube, but I know surprisingly little about it. I believe that it is a YA fantasy book about a 19-year-old girl who has some kind of magical ability because she works in the criminal underworld, breaking into people's minds. So there must be some kind of magic system. It must be an alternative universe to our own, and that's pretty much all I know about it. It's also a fairly chunky book. It's over 450 pages long, but as I said, I've seen people reading it, I've seen people praising it. I just don't know that much about it, but I was intrigued enough by the blurb to want to pick it up. Then we have The Enchanted by Renee Denfeld, and this is a book that I got for Christmas, and I am very excited to read this. I believe that it is about a man on death row, but that it has some kind of magical realism element to it. And I mentioned this in a recent video and had so many comments and so many messages from people telling me that they had read it or they'd read other stuff by Renee Denfeld and that it was fantastic. So this is a book that I definitely want to get to soon. I think that it isn't quite as it appears on the blurb. It seems like a very straightforward book, but I think that actually it has a bit of a twist to it, and I'm just really excited to get to this. Next up we have How to Stop Time by Matt Haig, and back in January I started a online book club with two other wonderful ladies, and this is the choice for March. The book club, if you're interested, is called The Bookish Mamas, and I will link it in the description box down below. But yeah, this is the book for March, so I wanted to pick it up so that I had it in advance. And basically this is a story about a 41-year-old man called Tom who appears to be just your average history teacher, but actually he has been alive for centuries, and so his knowledge spans from, let's see what it says on the back, from Elizabethan England to Jazz Age Paris, from New York to the South Seas. Tom has seen it all. As long as he keeps changing his identity, he can stay one step ahead of his past and stay alive. The only thing he must not do is fall in love. And I've never read a book by Matt Haig, but I have seen lots of people praising him as an author, so again this is one that I'm really looking forward to reading, and I will definitely be reading it in March. Next up we have a huge book, and that is Paris Adrift by E.J. Swift. This was a book that I ordered on a whim at the back end of last year, and I believe that it is science fiction meets a little bit of steampunk, meets time travel, meets romance, meets YA, kind of all bungled together. It's been blurbed by Claire North, who wrote the first 15 lives of Harry August, which I read in January, and I don't know much more about it than that, but I was intrigued by the premise. It basically says on the back, Paris was supposed to save Hallie. Now, well, let's just say Paris has other ideas. A glittering novel of time travel that you'll want to devour in one single bite. I loved it. So yeah, curious about this one, but it's absolutely gigantic, so I'm not sure exactly when I'm going to get to it, but intrigued nonetheless. Next up we have another very popular YA book, and that is Everything by Nicola Yoon. I don't tend to read many contemporary YA books, but I like to have a few on my shelf so that when I've come out of reading something that I found either hard work or particularly hefty, I've got something that I can just race through and not have to think about. I like to think of them as kind of easy to read, fluffy reads, and I think that this one pretty much is going to fit that bill. I believe that it's about a young girl who is allergic to pretty much everything. She's 17 years old, and then a boy moves next door and her whole world gets changed. I've heard pretty good things about this book. I tend to find YA contemporary, especially when they feature romance, to be a little bit on the angsty side, so I'm a bit dubious about this one, but I think that it's going to be very easy to read. And as I said, I have heard a lot of people say good things about it, so I am intrigued, I'm interested to see what I will think about it, and hopefully, as long as it's not too angsty, then it's one that I'm going to enjoy. Next up we have the Kicking the Bucket List by Kathy Hopkins, and again this is a contemporary about 3 sisters who come together for the reading of their mother's will and discover that in order to get their inheritance they have to carry out their mother's bucket list. And I think that this book sounds super fun. I think it sounds like a really heartwarming and funny read, and again it's the perfect kind of book to just fall into when I want something light, a little bit fluffy, but perhaps with maybe a slightly deeper undertone to it. But yeah, another one that I'm just really looking forward to picking up. Then one of the pre-orders which I was so excited to get in January, and that is Moonshine by Jasmine Gaba. This is, as I understand it, a fantasy book set in 1920s Chicago. So there is magic, and magic has been outlawed, and our protagonist Daisy Nell, who basically has a job, I think it's quite a public or high up job, and in a city where magic is outlawed and there are bounty hunters who trawl for magicians or magic users, Daisy begins to discover that she has inherited some kind of magical ability from her grandmother, and she has to decide whether she's going to go on the run or whether she's going to stay in a job and just try to conceal it. And I just think that it sounds absolutely fascinating. I love fantasy, I love books with a good magical element to them, but the fact that this is set in 1920s America, just, it's not an era that I am massively familiar with, but just conjures up in my head this kind of glamorous era with flappers and gangsters and all that kind of thing, and I just have such high hopes for this book. I'm really excited to read it. Then we have This Is How It Always Is by Laurie Frankel, and I'm not sure how I came across this book. I think it might have been recommended to me by Amazon because it arrived on the doorstep and I don't actually remember ordering it. But anyway, regardless, this is a contemporary about an ordinary family whose world is altered massively when their little boy tells them that when he grows up, what he really wants to be is a girl. I think possibly one of the things that intrigued me was that this has been blurbed by some authors whose work I absolutely adore. So we've got Leanne Moriarty and Katie Ford on the front, and I'm really curious about how an author is going to address a topic which is so current but so difficult, particularly in today's society. So yeah, another one that I'm not sure exactly when I'm going to get to it. I don't even remember ordering it, but very excited to read it nonetheless. Then we have The Secret of Nightingale Wood by Lucy Strange. This is a middle grade book, which is the February choice for bookish mamas. I told you that this book haul was in no particular order. So this is set in 1919, and it's the story of a little girl called Henry, and her family move out to the countryside following the death of her brother, and as you might imagine they are struggling to deal with this death and to process it. And so Henry spends most of the time living in her head with her bookish characters and bookish friends, until one day she wanders to, I think it's the edge of their estate, and there is a forest, Nightingale Wood. She meets somebody, she begins to build a relationship with this person, and the story kind of unfolds from there. I actually haven't read this yet. I've got about a week before we're going to discuss the book to read it, so I should probably know more about it than I do, but I'm really looking forward to reading it. I believe that this is middle grade, and so I think it's going to be super easy to get through, and the start of all the chapters have these gorgeous little illustrations on them, which is just so pretty. Let me see if I can find another one. But yeah, just another one that I'm really looking forward to picking up, and I will definitely be picking it up this month. Next we have Fragile Lives by Professor Stephen Westby, and this is a book which I have already talked about because it was on my February TBR. It's a non-fiction book. Professor Stephen Westby was a heart surgeon, and it basically is his account of some of the experiences that he had whilst he was working as a surgeon. And I mentioned in my TBR, I'm going to say it again, I am super squeamish, but I just think that this sounds so fascinating, and I'm so curious to understand more about the surgical world, to understand what it might actually feel like to physically hold somebody's heart in your hands. I think that I'm probably going to have to water it down by reading it slowly or reading it alongside something a bit more light-hearted. But yeah, just one that I'm really intrigued by, and it actually made it onto the Costa Book Awards shortlist, which is how I came across it, and I'm just fascinated to know more about this. So hopefully I will get to it in February. If not, then it will definitely be in March. Then we have the book that I am currently reading, and that is White Oleander by Janet Fitch. This is a very strange book, which is not at all what I was expecting, and I will definitely have more thoughts when I have finished it and talk about it in my February wrap-up. But it's basically a contemporary about a young girl whose mother is a poet, and she's very artistic and she's very flaky, and she's very neglectful, I guess, of her daughter. And then she goes to prison for murdering her lover, and her daughter Astrid is thrown into the American foster care system and has all kinds of harrowing and horrific experiences from that point on. And it's kind of a coming of age story, I guess. It's following Astrid as she learns more about her life and more about who her mother was and more about who she was, and obviously focuses very heavily on a mother-daughter relationship and how that can actually be quite a toxic thing, even if you don't necessarily realise that it is. So yeah, one that I'm still reading. The jury is still out on how I feel about it, but that was the next one. Then a book that I got for Christmas, we have Finnegan of the Rock by Melina Marchetta. This is a fantasy that I believe has very strong Celtic overtones. I heard about it from the Peruse Project channel, and it just sounds like it's going to tick all of my boxes. James bought me this one for Christmas with the promise that when I finish reading this one, he will buy me the remaining 2 in the trilogy, and it's one that I'm so excited to read, but it's so big, and I'm currently trying to finish the series that I'm already reading, so when I'll get to this one I'm not sure. But yeah, I just cannot wait. I think it's going to be political, I think it's going to be magical. I love anything with a Celtic or Gaelic setting. That's just right up my street, so I'm really excited for this one, and I'm desperately trying to finish the other books that I'm reading so that I can start this one soon. And then the final book that we have before we get onto the unboxing is It Just Me by Miranda Hart. Miranda Hart is a British comedienne, and although this is a Christmas book, I did actually get it for Christmas, and she does have a Santa hat on. I haven't read it yet, but I saw Miranda Hart live a couple of years ago and she was hilarious, and I love her show Miranda. I love everything about her. I've listened to her audiobook Peggy and Me. Well, it's not her audiobook, it's just her book Peggy and Me, and I really enjoyed that. So I'm very excited to read this one. I don't know if it is a Christmas book or if it is just a autobiography or what, but yeah, I'm just really excited to read it. I think if it's anything like her other work, I'm just gonna laugh and laugh and laugh, so really looking forward to this one. Okay, on to the unboxing. I have 2 Amazon parcels. As I've mentioned countless times on my channel, Amazon every now and then run a offer in the UK where you can get 3 books for £10, which is super cheap. So I often keep an eye out for any books that I'm particularly interested in and order them. So let's begin with the first one. So basically there are 6 books in these packages because I took part in the offer twice. Okay, first up we have a book that has been talked about pretty much non-stop in 2018, both in the booktube community and in the wider bookish community, and that is Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. And I really know nothing about this book apart from the fact that every time I seem to watch anybody's wrap-ups or hauls or go on Instagram and see a bookish post, that it features this book and that it features people talking about how incredible this book is. And I believe that it is about our protagonist Eleanor, who does the same thing day in, day out, and then something turns her world upside down. And yeah, I just can't wait to read it. I honestly have not heard anybody say anything bad about this book, and now that I have it, it's definitely going to be bumped up to the top of my TBR. Then another book which I've heard nothing but great things about is The Keeper of Lost Things by Ruth Hogan. Don't know much about this. I think it's about a man who collected all kinds of odds and ends and then decides to rope in his assistant to return them to their original owners. Again, don't know much about it, but what I have seen is that people have really rated this book and really recommended it and said that it's very heartwarming and very moving. So another one that I'm pretty intrigued to get to soon, although I'm surrounded by new books and, you know, I've got boxes and boxes upstairs while I'm waiting for my bookshelves to be built of books that I haven't read yet. So when I'll get to read it, I don't know, but I've heard nothing but great things about this, so it's another one that I'm very, very keen to read. Then we have the winner of the Costa Book Awards for last year, and that is Reservoir 13 by John McGregor, and I bought this because it was the winner of the Costa Book Awards, and it was also longlisted for the Man Booker Prize last year. And it's about a small village in which a girl goes missing, and it's about how the village never recovers from that. I think that it's very dark, I think that it's very moving, I think that it's a narrative and an observation about humans and our natures and how that impacts on the world around us. And yeah, I'm just really looking forward to reading it. Don't know much about the kind of ins and outs of the plot, but with such high acclaim coming from 2 different awards, I'm very, very excited to read this one as well. And then the final 3 books are in here. Let's start with the chunkiest book first. That is Tower of Dawn by Sarah J. Maas. If you are familiar with my channel, you'll know my love affair with Sarah J. Maas's writing, but I can't let go of this series. I believe that this book picks up Chaol's story. It's really difficult to talk about this book if you're not familiar with the Throne of Glass series, but this is just a continuation, but we're following a different thread of characters who have broken away from the main hub of characters. So it's kind of a spin-off, but not really. And yeah, I'm not too sure when I'm going to pick this up, not too sure how I feel about reading it, but I know that I want to know how the story ends. So yeah, at some point I will dive back into this, and this will be another one that I can tick off as a series almost finished, or as up to date as I possibly can be in the current series. And then another book that I picked up on a bit of a whim, and I can't really remember what it was that drew me to it. I think that it was a Richard and Judy recommendation, but this is The Witchfinders Sister by Beth Underdan, and I'll just read you what it says on the back. The number of women my brother Matthew killed, so far as I can reckon it, is 106. 1645, when Alice Hopkins' husband dies tragically, she returns to Manningtree, the small Essex town where her brother Matthew still lives, but home is no longer a place of safety. Whispers are spreading of witchcraft and the terrible fate awaiting the women accused. And at the heart of it all stands just one man. To what lengths will Matthew's obsession drive him, and what choice will Alice make when she finds herself at the very heart of his plan? So I think that this is kind of a historical thriller about the Witchfinder, who is obviously Matthew, and Alice, who is obviously the Witchfinder's sister, and that may be the worst synopsis I have ever given of any book. So I'm going to go with historical thriller, and I was pretty intrigued when I read it on Amazon. Again, I think it was a Richard and Judy recommendation. And it's been blurbed by Paula Hawkins and Sarah Perry, who wrote The Essex Serpent. So yeah, at some point I'll get round to reading that. It actually sounds pretty creepy, but I don't know, at some point I will get round to reading that, and that was terrible. If you're actually interested in this book, I suggest you go and look on Goodreads or something, because that was the worst roundup I've ever given of any book ever. And then the final book that I have to share with you is Hold Back the Stars by Katie Kahn. This is a love story, a classic boy meets girl story with a twist. Again, I'll just read you what it says on the back. It says, 90 minutes, a few years from now, not too far in the future, 2 people meet. It is a classic story of boy meets girl, except that it's not. When we find them, they have an hour and a half left. Unless they can save themselves, they won't survive. The clock is ticking. Bittersweet and life-affirming, Hold Back the Stars is the love story of the year. On that basis alone, I had to pick it up. It looks super short. It sounds super interesting. I'm really, really intrigued what the author is going to do with that kind of premise. And also the cover is so beautiful with the I don't know if you can see it there, with the gold speckles on the front. So yeah, another one that at some point I'll pick up, but I think sounds so interesting. So there you go, that is my latest book haul. I am now on a book buying pause. Apart from the books that I have pre-ordered, I'm kind of trying to work my way through the books that I already own, so when I read a chunk I can then order new ones, because If you're a bookish person, you know that the desire to buy books never goes away, because authors are always writing fantastic pieces of work and people are always talking about great books that they've read, and you always want to know what the fuss is about. So yeah, I'm pressing pause, but I'm sure that in a couple of months I will have another haul for you also. I hope that you enjoyed that video. If you've read any of the books that I hauled today, do let me know in the comments down below and let me know what you thought about them. If you're not subscribed to the channel already, then please click that subscribe button and give me the thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. But for now, thank you for watching and I'll see you all soon.